one survivor is an ensign named George Gay. He's a torpedo bomber pilot. He gets shot down, but he ditches his plane and he lands in the water and is able to get out of the plane. Unfortunately, his radio operator gunner is killed, but he gets out of the plane and he is literally floating in the middle of the Japanese fleet. I mean, all around him is a Japanese fleet. He's just out here floating, trying not to be conspicuous, bobbing around in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And he sees the entire thing unfold. Literally front row seat. I mean, watching the Japanese carriers, they're right there. He gets shot at a couple times, but they miss.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Heroes Path webinar series. I'm John Fenzel. Tonight's subject is one of the most consequential battles in American history. 6 minutes at Midway, the battle that changed the Pacific War is what we're calling this. Our presenter is Colonel Gerry Tertychny, U.S. Army retired. Jerry's a great friend who's served 28 years across infantry, special forces, civil affairs, ROTC assignments, and he retired in 2015 as Director of Special Operations Forces at the U.S. Army War College up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. But few people can connect the tactics, the intelligence, leadership of a battle like this the way that Gerry can. Gerry, thank you for joining us. It's just great to be with you. Great to have you with us. I know we've been trying to plan this for a little while, but the floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. I call you sir because I can't get out of the habit. We served together quite a few years ago, but it's great to be back with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about a very important piece of American history, a very important piece of military and naval history. Like John said, 6 minutes at Midway, where the tide of the war in the Pacific in 1942 literally turned, and it wasn't going to be the same afterwards. So it's a great story of courage, determination, a really great story of leadership and trust and decision making and trusting your gut. A lot of timing, a lot of it inadvertent timing. It just kind of happened that way, and a little bit of luck. But so appreciate the opportunity. Let's go ahead and get started. Let me get teed up.
We practiced this. We're good at it.
We practiced it, and I think we're good. Says I'm screen sharing. I was a paratrooper. I ain't too bright. Okay. Thanks again. So 6 minutes at Midway, June 4th, 1942. And we're going to start. What I like to do is to start a little bit about how we got to this moment in time, what happened prior to June 4th of 1942. So the road to war, how did we get in the Second World War? In the late 1800s, early 1900s, you start seeing some tensions between the Far East and the United States. As a result of the war in 1898, the Spanish-American War, the U.S. moves into the Western Pacific, specifically Hawaii, and most importantly, the Philippines, and we start having a presence there. Japan, after the Russo-Japanese War in the early 1900s, they start becoming a power, not only in the region, but in the world. And they go into Manchuria. You can see the light red portion of the map up there, Manchuria and China, what later is Korea in 1931. But because Japan's an island nation, they are very much reliant on imports, particularly from the United States. In particular, things like oil, gas, other kinds of fuel, rubber, and steel, iron, tin, that kind of stuff. They can't produce a lot of that themselves. They have to import it. So as a result of their operations and their basically subjugation of the people in Manchuria, President Roosevelt in 1940, after Japan goes into French Indochina, he halts shipments of machine tools, aviation fuel, stuff like that to the Japanese. In addition, in 1941, moves our Pacific Fleet from the west coast of the United States out to Hawaii, to Pearl Harbor, and we see an increased buildup in the Philippines. And in 1941, he stops all oil exports to Japan. So they've got to find another place in order to get this to carry on their war machine in China. They realize, okay, we can get this stuff, what they refer to as the Southern Resource Area, in Indochina, the Netherlands East Indies, or the Dutch East Indies down there around Borneo. You can see in orange down there, and in Indochina. There's rubber down there, there's oil down there, they can get what they need. But in order to do that, what's standing right in their way? You can see right there in blue, the Philippine Islands with a very big American presence. So in order to keep the United States and Great Britain out of the way, they're going to have to take out Singapore, Malaya, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island to have free reign down there in Southeast Asia. And the big problem that they're going to face is what they believe is the big problem is the U.S. Pacific Fleet that's at Pearl Harbor. If they go in there, they got to get the Philippines out of the way, but those are Americans. And if they go after that, the American fleet's going to come after them. That's our major striking force in the Western Pacific. So we're going to lead up now. We're in like 1941.
Hey, Gerry, let me ask you a quick question. So how much of this was about oil and raw materials versus ideology and empire, would you say?
You're probably looking at about, I would believe, probably about 50-50. The Japanese were in this expansionist period. There was a very militaristic swing to their high command, particularly in the army, not as much in the navy, but particularly in the army. And they looked at establishing what they called the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, where they were basically going to create an Eastern or a Western Pacific empire over there. Now, in order to do that, they need a military. In order to keep their military going, they need those raw materials. So one kind of fed off each other.
Great, great. Well, I recognize Billy Mitchell here, so let's talk about him.
Oh, Billy Mitchell. So while this is going on in the interwar years between the First World War and the Second World War, in the naval service, you've got this argument going on between the battleship sailors and the carrier navy, which is an aircraft carrier. Naval aviation is an up and coming kind of thing. It's new. It's a new form of naval warfare. There's proponents of each in senior positions. There's particularly in the Navy. You got the old battleship guys who are like, no, the war's going to be fought by battleships slugging it out. And you got the new guys coming up who are going, no, wars are going to be fought by carrier-based aircraft. And a couple things kind of help the carrier guys along in the mid 20s. In 1921, Billy Mitchell, that's that gentleman on the right, he's an Army Air Corps guy. Remember, at this point, we don't have a U.S. Air Force yet. It's part of the U.S. Army. It's the Army Air Corps. He pulls off a demonstration. In the bottom picture there, he proves that you can bomb and destroy a battleship from the air. And it's an old German battleship from the World War I era. But he proves it can be done. And then in early November of 1940, before we are actually in the war, the British pull off an attack against the Italian fleet at a place called Taranto, using torpedo bombers launched from an aircraft carrier. And that picture up top is a British Swordfish torpedo bomber, and they trashed the Italian fleet. So those two things kind of lean toward, hey, this is a viable, it's not just some people spitballing. This could actually happen. And of course, the big lesson comes on December 7, 1941 at Pearl Harbor, when we get a bloody nose at the hands of the Japanese.
Well, let me ask you too, Jerry, did Pearl Harbor settle that debate overnight, or did it take midway to truly end the whole battleship era, so to speak?
But it's a good question, sir. And can I hold off on that for just a second? Because I think I'll hit it.
Okay.
So in the Japanese naval hierarchy, you got this gentleman right here, Isoroku Yamamoto. And he is basically the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet in 1941. He's a their Naval Academy grad, 1904. He fights the Russians in 1905. He's wounded, loses a couple fingers, but he spends a lot of time in the United States in the 20s and the 30s. He goes to Harvard University for 2 years, and he's a Japanese naval attaché in D.C., working in their embassy. So he travels throughout the United States, and even though in the 30s, America is in the midst of a horrible depression, he sees the economic, the farming, and the industrial potential in the United States. And he is convinced that going to war with the United States is not a good idea. He's vehemently against it. He's also a proponent of naval aviation. He's a guy who's kind of one of these. He kind of turns from being a surface warfare guy to seeing the value of naval aviation and aircraft carriers. He really didn't think the Japanese should get involved in China. He didn't see that as a great idea. He thought it was wrong. And he really thought that their pact with Hitler was not a good idea. He thought it was just going to bring them really hard times. Turns out he was right. So Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41, the Japanese decide, again, because if they want to go into the Indonesia area, they're going to have to take out the Philippines. If they take out the Philippines, they're going to elicit a response from us. So we got to take out American striking force, and that's the Pacific Fleet based at Pearl Harbor. They enjoy overwhelming surprise and an incredible tactical victory. They sink a load of battleships and cause a significant number of casualties. But they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. They ended up sinking a bunch of obsolete battleships. The ships that they sunk were the World War I and before era battleships. They're not competitive anymore. So our new class of battleships, the first of the fast ones, the North Carolina class, then the South Dakota class, and then the Iowa class that we're familiar with, those are just coming online in 42. So these battleships probably would not have played a big role in any battleship fight. But what they don't do is they don't hit our aircraft carriers. The aircraft carriers on December 7th are at sea. The major striking power of our Pacific Fleet is not there. So they missed the number one target they were going after. The carriers are gone. They missed the fuel tank farm. They miss the dry docks. They don't destroy the submarines pens, and they don't block the channel. So they cause a lot of destruction. Unfortunately, they kill a lot of people, but they really don't accomplish what they wanted to do. Pearl Harbor is still operational. And now, to answer your question, John, carriers are now the main effort regarding from the United States perspective for a number of reasons. One, we just got shown how carrier-based aircraft could take out battleships. We just got proven, albeit in a harbor and not at sea, but still. But also, we have no choice. Our battleships are at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. The new ones aren't online yet, so we have to go to aircraft carriers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have no choice. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, this is what we got left.
Hey, Jerry, how much did those misses on the part of the Japanese cost them 6 months later in Midway? Maybe you'll get to that
Well,
too.
yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on it right now, Pearl Harbor is going to still be used as our forward operating base. The Pacific Fleet and the Central Pacific Campaign is going to be run out of Pearl Harbor, and the strike force that battles the Japanese at Midway is going to launch from Pearl Harbor. I mean, again, the channel is not blocked; it's still an operable base. Not only that, other than the Arizona, which was a total loss, and the Oklahoma, which I believe was capsized on its way being towed back to the west coast of the United States, all of the other ships that were sunk at Pearl Harbor were repaired and put back into action against the Japanese before the end of the war. That in of itself that's a whole incredible operation right there. We raised those things, patched the holes, blew the water out of them, cleaned them up, and put it back into action.
Amazing.
Absolutely astounding. And there's a really good, I wish I had the title of it. There's a good book out there about it that shows, it's got pictures of the engineering operation of basically uncapsizing a battleship and basically raising it and putting it back into action.
Well, maybe what we can do is we can share that to all the participants afterwards. I can send it
Absolutely,
to everybody.
absolutely. But it's incredible feat of will and engineering to make that happen. But the number one thing is the Japanese miss the carriers. That's our major striking force. And they don't follow up with an invasion of Hawaii. So Hawaii is still an operational base. And we're going to operate from there for the rest of the war. So just a quick timeline. So December 7th, Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. On the 8th, they go into the Philippines, and that's basically the same kind of time because you get international dateline. U.S. declares war on Japan. President Roosevelt, the day that will live in infamy, gives that speech. Because Japan has a pact with Germany and Italy, they declare war on us on December 11th. And then on the same day, we declare war on Germany and Italy. So by the 11th of December, we're all in. Right, we're all at war with each other. Right? We are on the side of the Allies, and probably, I believe, the person who was most ecstatic over the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor was Winston Churchill, because he knew at this point the United States is in the war, and we're going to win. It's going to take a few years, but we're going to win. Because up until then, you remember, Europe had been overrun, the Japanese were overrunning most of Southeast Asia, and the Brits were the only ones still standing. But now we're on board. It's going to happen. It's going to take a little time, but it's going to happen. Okay, so in walks this guy. This is Chester Nimitz. Now, Nimitz is a Naval Academy grad, class of 1905. Think about these guys that graduated from the academy, 35, 40 years ago, or from where we're talking 1942, which now that I think about it, I graduated about 40 years ago too.
Anyway, don't take yourself.
we'll just let that go. But he grows up as a surface commander, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, because, well, we didn't have carriers back then. But he's in the First World War. Later on, he transitions to submarines. On December 17, 41, he is told by Admiral King, the Chief of Naval Operations, go out to Pearl Harbor. You are now in charge. And he's given specific guidance, do not come home until our ships sail into Tokyo Bay. Okay, that's pretty concrete guidance. I got it. And he salutes and moves out. Later that month, he'll be promoted to a 4-star admiral, and he becomes the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet and basically the architect of the war in the Central Pacific from that point forward. Now, under Nimitz, you got this guy, all right, William F. Halsey, Bill Halsey, otherwise known as Bull Halsey, and he looks like an interesting customer there. He graduated a year ahead of Nimitz, so they knew each other at the academy. He grows up on surface warfare units. He's in the First World War. But in 1935, when he's 52 years old, he goes to flight school and becomes a naval aviator. And he is a convert to aircraft carriers, naval aviation, and the carrier arm being the new main effort in the United States Navy. And he commands a USS Saratoga. His carriers are at sea during the Pearl Harbor attack. They return the evening of December 8th after the attack has taken place. And he says he's on the bridge. He's looking at the destruction that's been run. He says, by the time we're through with them, the only place the Jap language will be spoken in will be hell. I mean, he is on a crusade. He wants to absolutely destroy these guys for what they did at Pearl Harbor. And he's kind of the guy to do it. He's a I mean, he's a knothead. He's a hard charging fighter. And he launches on a series of raids against Japanese island installations throughout the Pacific, basically driving his carriers close, launching a raid, tearing up a Japanese installation, and then pulling back, and then kind of doing this because that's really all we can do at the time. I mean, our Navy, our battleships are at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. Our war machine hasn't geared up yet. It will, but it hasn't yet. And then he actually is commanding the task force that launches the Doolittle raid in April of 1942. So Jimmy Doolittle, all right, we're in a tough spot, okay? Corregidor and the Philippines are about to fall. We know this. The Japanese are running rampant. We got dealt a really bloody nose at Pearl Harbor. We got to strike back. We got to do something. So some apparent lunatics come up with an idea like, how about we put B-25 bombers on an aircraft carrier, will fly to the Japanese coast, they'll bomb Tokyo, keep going, and then land in China at airfields that are controlled by the Flying Tigers, the American volunteer group that are operating in China. This will be great. Yeah, okay. But and they practice. They actually paint the outline of an aircraft carrier on the runway down at Eglin Field in Florida. And they practice short takeoffs. They didn't have to worry about landing because they weren't coming back. It was a one way job. So they're out there, and they have to take off early. So they have to take off further out from Tokyo than they wanted to because there was a Japanese fishing boat in the area and they were afraid they would radio their location. So they needed to go. They do fly. They hit Tokyo and a couple of other places, but there's only 16 bombers and a B-25 doesn't carry much of a payload. The damage is actually very, very minimal. The physical damage is very, very minimal, but the psychological damage is impressive because the Japanese people have been told the home islands are impregnable. There's no way anybody can touch us. And then all of a sudden the sirens go off and there's American bombers overhead. And that's a problem because their whole propaganda network had just got shattered. Specifically, they don't target radio stations. They specifically avoid radio stations because they want the word to get out over Japanese radio that, oh, wow, the home islands and Tokyo just got bombed by American bombers. Yeah, they want that psychological attack. So it's pretty cool thinking on their part. The planes carry on to China, but because they had to launch further out, they don't make it to those airfields. Most guys had to either crash land or bail. Doolittle thought he was going to be brought home and court-martialed over the effects, but he actually gets promoted from lieutenant colonel over colonel to brigadier general, and they give him the Medal of Honor in the White House, and he goes and he fights in Europe. But that, by the way, in the lower right-hand picture, that's him standing right there in the middle with his hands down at his sides. That's him in China after he crash landed. One plane is interned in the USSR. 3 men are killed in action. 8 men are actually captured. 4 survive captivity. 3 are actually executed by the Japanese, and 1 dies in captivity. But there are massive, massive reprisals against the Chinese people in China for this operation and for them helping us. But there's some cool pictures there of the aircraft taking off from the Hornet. And the first plane off was Doolittle. Now he was a bit of a lunatic too. He was in the interwar years. He was a barnstormer, kind of a speed pilot, flying these air shows and stuff. So he's kind of crazy. And I think he's the one who came up with the idea in the first place. Maybe we can launch from an aircraft carrier. But he's the first guy off the deck, so he's got the shortest amount of runway. I mean, he had to time their takeoff so that he was actually hitting the end of the runway when the bow was coming up. And the plane actually, there's actually film footage of it you can go and watch on YouTube. The plane actually disappears below the front of the ship and then comes back up again. They didn't know if he was going to make it until he took off. But
hey, Gerry, you said that the raid didn't do a lot of physical damage, but it helped provoke Midway. Strategically, do you think it baited Japan into a fight on American terms, and was it worth the cost?
Absolutely, they were, and I think we'll talk about it in the next slide. Actually, I think it's how prescient of you to bring that up because I think this is the. So here you go. So the Japanese response to this is initial. There's a little bit of panic, like, oh my God, we got hit by bombers. These are land-based bombers. Like, where did they come from? I think the thought of launching off an aircraft carrier they're like, no, they thought perhaps they came from the Aleutians. The Alaskan island chain up in the north or some other place. Where did these guys come from? And their confidence is shaken. Hey, the home islands have been attacked. The emperor almost got bombed. I mean, this is a big deal. So we're like, all right, look, this can't stand. We can't have this. We have got to expand our perimeter. We got to push that perimeter out and get the American. Well, I think they eventually figured out, okay, I think they launched them from a carrier. Okay, well, that's even more impetus for them to say, we need to push the perimeter out so they can't do this again. And we need to take out their carriers so they can't pull this off again. And it really kind of drives their strategy in the next 6 weeks. Shangri-La is President Roosevelt. They said, where did those bombers come from? And he said in an interview, he said they came from our secret base at Shangri-La. He didn't want to say, but eventually I think the Japanese figured it out. And you got to imagine at some high command meeting, there's probably some ensign sitting up against a wall going, I wonder if they came from an aircraft carrier, and they're probably telling him, dude, sit down, shut up. You don't know what you're talking to me like, but yeah, in the end, that's exactly what happened. But so the Japanese decide, okay, look, we got to push this perimeter out. We're going to go down into the Coral Sea, which is just east of Australia, down there, down by New Guinea. We're going to push out Midway and the Aleutians and push this perimeter out to keep the American carriers from ever getting in a position to strike at us again. And it's going to kind of drive the way they're operating. Now, the Coral Sea in Australia is important because one of our number one strategic objectives is in Europe to keep England in the war afloat as a staging base for the invasion of continental Europe, and to keep Australia afloat as a staging base for our offensive operations eventually back into the Pacific. So the sea lanes between the west coast of the United States and Australia could be threatened if the Japanese got a foothold down there in the Coral Sea. And that's kind of what they were looking at doing. And that's why it was so important to us. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, the Doolittle raid, though it didn't really cause a lot of physical damage, it hit them psychologically, and it really kind of forced them into this operation.
Yeah.
Around the 6th of May, we lose Corregidor. The Philippines are now in Japanese hands, so the Philippines are gone. Right? They're out. They're out of the picture, and our buildup is taking place in Australia, and there's serious concern on the Allies' part of the Japanese going to come after Australia. I mean, there's not a lot there to stop them if they do, because a lot of the Australian troops, part of the British Empire, are fighting in North Africa. Right? So who's there? We got to get some people there. But at the same time, 4 to 8 May, we have the Battle of Coral Sea. So Operation MO, as it's been termed, and it's a move by the Japanese to attack Port Moresby in New Guinea and Australia and the U.S. sea lanes down there, like we just talked about. It's a naval battle which takes place under this guy right here. Upper right is a guy named Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, which I think is a really cool name for a fighting admiral. Frank Jack Fletcher. This guy, he's like kind of hard as nails. He's a Medal of Honor recipient from Veracruz in 1914. 30 years prior, he earned the Medal of Honor. So, I mean, look at this guy. Like, he doesn't look like he's going to be screwed with. So we have Fletcher's got the Yorktown and the Lexington, our carriers down there, the Yorktown and the Lexington. We lose the Lexington. It's sunk. It's gone. The Yorktown is severely damaged. Upper left picture there on your screen is the Lexington. It's abandoned and sunk. And then the Yorktown is very, very seriously damaged. But the Japanese lose the light carrier Shoho, which is your lower picture. That's it, under attack. And the fleet carrier, the Shukaku, is damaged. Now, a fleet carrier is what we term the big carrier. They carry almost 100 airplanes. A light carrier or an escort carrier, much smaller. So our carriers, Yorktown, Lexington, Saratoga, Hornet, those are fleet carriers. They're big. They carry close to 100 aircraft. And the Japanese kind of use the same nomenclature. But the Shokaku is severely damaged. The Zuikaku, it loses almost its entire air group, all its aircraft and its pilots. And neither one of those are available for Midway, which is going to happen about a month later. This action is important and critical for a number of reasons. The Japanese abandoned the operation. Australia is safe for the time being. New Guinea is okay for right now. And this is the first naval action in history where the opposing fleets never saw each other. This is the carrier battle that the carrier advocates have been talking about for, about 20 years or so. This is the future of naval combat. And it happens right here. So it's fought by aircraft.
Would you say, Gerry, that this was kind of a real opening move for the Battle of Midway?
Absolutely. This is the start of the Midway campaign. Part of their whole strategic objective, or even, I guess, operational objective, is to go into Midway, go into the Coral Sea, and go into the Aleutians and push that perimeter out. Right. And this was the opening salvo right here. And they kind of get a bloody nose. I mean, we lose the Lexington, and the Yorktown gets damaged, but we turn them around. They don't achieve their objective down there. New Guinea is safe for the time being. Australia is safe. The sea lanes are safe. So, and this kind of really drives another nail in the coffin of battleship warfare, of the battleship advocates. It's like, okay, here you go. It just happened. This was all done by carrier-based aircraft. There was no surface engagement. So that form of warfare, it's turning. All right. So that takes place the first week of May. All right. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, back at the ranch, okay, back in Pearl Harbor, you got these code breaker guys. Now there's a common misconception. Oh, we broke their code. We broke one of their. We broke a code. We broke a Japanese naval code. The guy on the left is a guy named Commander Joe Roquefort. He's an intel guy. He's a thinker. He's a code breaking guy. Speaks Japanese, and he's working on this effort. And it's going on in Pearl Harbor. We're intercepting messages, and we think we got it cracked. Interestingly, we use musicians to help do this. I didn't realize this until kind of doing some research for this, that after Pearl Harbor, all of the battleships that were sunk, each one of them had a band, like a musical band. Well, they didn't have ships anymore. So these guys got to be reassigned somewhere. So they gave them to him. But it turns out that musicians are often very, very good at detecting pattern, repetition, and they're very good at cracking codes.
That's fascinating.
Because I think it was pretty inadvertent. I don't think anybody knew that. I think they was like, I'll send him over there to Roquefort. Maybe he can use them, and they're working in these bunkers. But they determine that they've been seeing Japanese radio traffic identifying an objective called AF. And Roquefort is convinced that it's Midway. He's convinced that's where they're going. So they come up with a ruse. They send by underground cable, not over the air, to Midway. They say, hey, tomorrow, send a message over the air saying that you're having trouble with your water purification unit. And they're like, well, but we're not. Like, I know, just do it. All right. So they send a message, we're having trouble with our water purification unit. Then we intercept a Japanese transmission that says AF is having trouble with their water purification unit, like the very next day or a day or so later. So it's like, okay, so now we know that's where they're going. They're going to Midway. The Japanese don't know this. They don't know that we're reading their mail, right? They might suspect it, but they don't know it, and they don't take any actions to change it. Okay, so Midway Island's identified as a Japanese objective. So Coral Sea, yeah, one thing. I think they're going to the Aleutians, maybe, but they're going after Midway. That's what they're trying to do.
Hey, Jerry, how close did the United States actually come to not knowing that Midway was the target?
Well, at this particular time, there's a lot of this going on between Nimitz and his staff and naval staff back in D.C., the Pentagon, those guys. They're convinced Aleutians or maybe even the West Coast of the United States. And Nimitz is going to take a hard line and go, hey, look, I trust my guys. We've come up with this. This is where they're going. And he basically says, get off my back. I got this. Let it go. But it was pretty close. So they determine the date of the attack is going to be 4 or 5 June 1942. And this is mid-May. And Nimitz is like, all right, look, like, give me some solid, your no yet gut feeling, whatever. And this guy on the right is a gentleman named Edwin Layton. He is an intel officer working on Nimitz's staff, but he and Roquefort are very, very close. They're very tight. They both speak Japanese. They're very close. They talk with each other. He intercepts, he tells them stuff, and he briefs. He tells Nimitz, he goes, sir, the Japanese fleet, 0600 4 June 1942, they'll be located at 325 degrees, 175 miles northwest of Midway. I mean, if that isn't clear, I'm telling you, this is where they're going to be.
Yeah.
This is where they're going to be. He is so sure. He is positive this is what's going to happen. And Nimitz, this is one of those instances of trust. He has Layton take him to go see Roquefort in his operation. He looks around, he's walking around, he's watching these guys, he's seeing how it works, how they decode stuff. He goes, okay. He trusts this guy, and he takes a gamble on this guy because he's so confident that this is what's going to happen. So here you got a 4-star admiral, and at the time, these two guys are commanders, like lieutenant colonels. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go. And Washington is they're beating him up. No, they're coming for the Aleutians. They're coming for the West Coast. They're doing this. And he goes, no, my guys say this is what's going to happen. Again, pretty ballsy move, even for a 4-star.
Well, it's a great lesson just for all of us today, is to trust your people. If you trust your team, then this is something you can carry forward into actual results.
Yep, absolutely. And to Nimitz's credit, he does say, all right, take me over there. I want to see this operation. And he meets Roquefort. And Roquefort, he's walking around in a bathrobe and bedroom slippers. He's this weird kind of guy. Like he's just thinker. He thinks in like dreams in Japanese. I mean, he's just on a different frequency. And he goes, okay. He goes, I want to see how you came up with this, because everybody else is saying this, and you guys are saying this. So I want to see. But after that, he's convinced, like, okay, all right, we're gonna do it. We're gonna go with it. They're going after Midway, so that's how we're gonna react.
That's a great story.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, great stuff. So enter Ray Spruance. So Spruance is also Naval Academy, graduated around the same time, surface guy, World War I. He is the carrier escort guy for Bill Halsey. So when Halsey's doing these carrier raids in the early days after Pearl Harbor, Spruance is the guy whose cruisers and destroyers are keeping up with him and protecting him. So he understands how carrier and naval aviation kind of work. Halsey gets hospitalized with the shingles in May, and Nimitz is like, "Yeah, you're out of the battle, man. Who do you recommend to take your place?" And he's, without even thinking about it, he goes, "Ray Spruance." Well, Spruance is a cruiser commander. He's a surface guy. He's not an aviator. And he goes, "Yeah, I know, but he knows what he's doing. He knows how to do it. He's been following me around for the last 3-4 months. Got it." And once again, Nimitz goes, "Okay, okay." He trusts his subordinate. He asks him for his opinion. He gives it to him, and he goes, "Okay, that's your gut response. I'm going to go with Spruance." And he catches hell for it from DC too. "What are you doing? You're putting a cruiser guy in charge of whatever." And he goes, "Halsey recommended him. It's my decision. Like, back off. I got this." So he does it again, basically.
Well,
And
let me ask you, Jerry,
sure.
was this a lucky accident, or did Spruance's temperament actually fit the moment better than Halsey's may have?
It's the good thing is Bull Halsey ain't called Bull for nothing. He kind of likes to barrel ahead, and Spruance comes up with a plan for. They're like, "Hey, look, this is what we think." They're going after Midway, and Spruance says, "Okay, in that case, I'm going to place my carrier task force 16, which is the Enterprise and the Hornet, because remember the Yorktown is being repaired right in Pearl Harbor. I'm going to go northeast of Midway and wait." He goes that way, and we'll have a search pattern. We'll look for them. The thing they're operating off of is we know that's their plan, and we really think it is. They don't know that we know that. So we have a significant advantage there. And Spruance is a little more like, but what if Washington's right? What if they're right? He goes, if I'm northeast of Midway, I'm in a good position to react to that. So either way, I'm good. So yeah, he's a little more even keeled. Halsey's a little kind of pugnacious kind of guy. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. And again, this could have been one of those divine interventions that takes place every now and again. So he's got Task Force 16, the Enterprise and the Hornet, and he's going to move to a point northeast of Midway. And again, he tells Nimitz, "This is my plan." And he goes, "Well, what about?" He goes, "No. Here's why. Because this, and this. Washington might be right. If they do move, whatever, I can, whatever." And Nimitz again says, "Okay, you're the man. You're the man. It's your task force. You do it. You got my guidance. You do it." And once again, Nimitz, hey, to his credit, he's like, "Hey, that's my guy. I put him in charge. He's in charge. Get off his back. Let him do it." And he gets out of the way, which is pretty cool, especially considering the gravity of the situation. This is it. There's only like a couple carriers between the Japanese and Hawaii and the West Coast. So, but he does it and he lets him get on with it. So yeah, so Ray Spruance there. All right, then we got this guy on the other side, on the Japanese side. You got this guy, Chuichi Nagumo. He's a Naval Academy graduate, Japanese Naval Academy, 1908, surface ship commands. He leads the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 41. And he's criticized for not launching a third attack. He's seen as being a little timid. Like, you should have launched a third attack. But Nagumo's response is, "Hey, we didn't know where the American carriers were, right? They could have hit us. I mean, because we didn't know where they were. Our carriers didn't know where the Japanese fleet was, and they didn't know where we were." He goes, "So I needed to get. We had done considerable damage to Pearl Harbor, and I needed to get out of there before I lose my ships to an American air attack." He's not at Coral Sea. Coral Sea, the Japanese command is kind of convoluted. There's a couple different guys in charge, and that may have contributed to the results there. But he's in charge of the Japanese strike force heading toward Midway. All right, opposing forces. There's a lot of talk about, the Japanese are overwhelmingly outnumbered us. Oh my God, and we were actually a little more on par than I think folks have been led to believe. So the Enterprise, the Hornet, and the Yorktown. So the Yorktown Task Force 17 under Fletcher shows up and links up with Task Force 16. When the Yorktown rolls after Coral Sea, when it rolls into Pearl Harbor, these guys are like, it's going to take 6 months back on the West Coast to get this thing ready to go. I mean, there's no way. The damage is so extensive. What's his name? Nimitz goes, "You got 72 hours, right? This thing's going to sail in 72 hours. And I don't care if the workers are still on board when it sails and they're working all the way into the combat zone, but we need this carrier and it's sailing." And they get it. They get it repaired in sufficient to a sufficient level to actually take part in the battle. So we're looking at 3 carriers: Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown. The Japanese have 4. Kaga, the Akagi, the Hiryu, and the Soryu. Those were 4 of the fleet carriers that were involved in the attack on Pearl Harbor. We don't have any battleships, right? Our new fast battleships aren't out yet, and the other ones are literally dead in the water at Pearl Harbor. But the parity is kind of there. I mean, cruisers, submarines, destroyers. We got some PT boats. Number of carrier-based aircraft, 233 to the Japanese 248. It's roughly equivalent, but we have something the Japanese don't. Two things, actually. One, we own Midway Island. We're on the piece of ground, and we have carrier or land-based aircraft there, including heavy bombers, U.S. Army Air Corps heavy bombers. So we have that base to operate out of. The Japanese don't. The other thing we have that they don't have is we're reading their mail, right? They don't have that. They don't know that we know, right? So we're actually in a pretty good situation. The Japanese are convinced, as they're coming toward Midway, they're convinced that our carriers are still at Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
And they're operating off of like a week-old intelligence. They're operating off some very old intelligence. And there are actually some Japanese intel officers who said, we need to get some aircraft over Pearl Harbor and confirm this, because we haven't seen anything from the American carriers in like over a week. And they're like, no. If we do that, that'll just tip the Americans off. Okay, but you're making a very big assumption that the American carrier force is still at Pearl Harbor, and we don't know that. That intel is a week old. But the Japanese high command are like, no, we don't want to risk it. So they go into it kind of blind. They think they're coming up against a pretty unarmed. It's going to be a rollover victory at Midway. American carriers are nowhere to be seen, and it's going to be a pushover. Yeah, it doesn't work out that way. All right, so Midway Atoll is, believe it or not, it's part of the Hawaiian Islands chain. If you look at your little map on the lower left, all the way up in the upper left, you see Midway. It's way up there. It's part of that chain of volcanic islands. It's not a part of the territory of Hawaii, but it's part of the same geographical chain. Broken up into two islands, Eastern Island and Sand Island. The airfield you can see there is Easter Island, and it's named Midway Atoll or Midway Island because it is roughly midway between North America and Asia. I mean, it's almost on the international date line. It's right there. So kind of middle of nowhere, halfway between nowhere and no place, but it's a great base to have for launching reconnaissance flights out into the Western Pacific and for use as a staging base. And that's why the Japanese want it, and that's why we want it. So at Midway, the one thing, remember we talked earlier about what we have is we have Midway Island and we have aircraft based on Midway Island. So there's a significant force there. The first one in your upper left is there's 31 of these. It's called a PBY Catalina. It's a flying boat reconnaissance aircraft. And these things are going to play a major role in the reconnaissance fight, finding the Japanese fleet in the coming days. The upper right, 6 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers. This is a new plane that's coming into service in 1942. George H.W. Bush was a Avenger pilot back in World War II. He flew one of those things. It's nicknamed a turkey because it was kind of cumbersome and kind of fat and kind of hard to fly. Middle left is the SBD Dauntless dive bomber, which is a fairly new aircraft. It's been in service for a little while, and these things are going to play a major role in the coming battle. There's 19 of them based there. Middle right is the F-4F Wildcat fighter. Pretty good fighter. It doesn't have the speed or the maneuverability of the Japanese fighters, but it's pretty heavily armed. It's got some serious firepower on it, 50 caliber machine guns, and it's got some serious armor on it. It's a pretty survivable kind of aircraft. And then some obsolete kind of aircraft. The lower left is the Scout Bomber SB-2 uniform Vindicator dive bombers. Those are kind of going out of service, but we got 17 of them. And then the bottom right, the F-2A Brewster Buffalo fighter, which is completely obsolete, but we've got a squadron of them under a guy named Floyd Parks. They're Marine pilots, but that's actually on the island. That's not counting the aircraft we have on our aircraft carriers. So we got a pretty sizable force there that we can add to the fight. In addition, 17 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, U.S. Army Air Corps, the upper picture there, and 4 of the lower one there, the 2-engine B-26 Marauder bombers. So we've got some pretty good firepower that we could launch against the Japanese fleet once we find it. And this is something the Japanese don't have. We have possession of the island, and we got aircraft on that island. They don't, right? They don't really even know that we have this. Okay, a little bit about naval carrier aviation organization. Both us and the Japanese kind of followed a similar organization. Each aircraft carrier would house what was called an air group. So you had an Enterprise Air Group, the Hornet Air Group, the Yorktown Air Group, and each air group typically had 4 squadrons. A squadron of fighters, a squadron of dive bombers, another squadron of dive bombers using a scouting role, and a squadron of torpedo bombers. So the only difference between the scouting dive bombers and the bombing dive bombers was the armament. Bombers in the bombing role typically carried a 1,000-pound bomb. The scout planes usually carried a 500-pounder so they could fly farther. Their job was to actually find the enemy fleet and mark it, typically with smoke or drop smoke canisters to mask the approach of the torpedo bombers. So we got 3 of these air groups, 1 on each carrier. So in addition to the argument over battleships versus carriers, there's an argument going on in naval aviation on torpedoes versus bombs. And there's advocates for both. The torpedo guys are like, hey, man, Pearl Harbor, man, what did they sink everything with? Torpedoes. You got to put a hole in the ship under the waterline to let water in to sink a ship. And the retort is, yeah, but I mean, what the Arizona was sunk by a bomb, a single bomb that penetrated the magazine and blew it up. So torpedo bombers are slow. They're incredibly vulnerable when they're on their torpedo runs. They fly low to the water, very slow, very easy prey for anti-aircraft fire or for enemy fighters. Whereas the Dauntless dive bombers, they come down at about an 85-degree down angle, almost straight down onto a target. A lot harder to hit with anti-aircraft fire and a lot harder to hit with fighters. So there's this argument going back and forth in the early days of the war. Again, there's a picture of a F-4F fighter, Wildcat fighter on the top, the Dauntless in the middle, and then the bottom one is a TBD Devastator, which is a torpedo bomber. You can see that plane's got a torpedo hanging beneath it. These planes came out in around 1935, and they are horribly obsolete at the time of the battle. They're incredibly slow, and they're going to get mauled, as we'll see. But that's what we got. I mean, that's what we got going into this fight. And there's a couple of the names of the guys who were commanding these squadrons. Japanese are doing the same thing, right? They've got a similar organization. They usually, on each aircraft carrier, they have a fighter squadron, a dive bomber squadron, and a torpedo bomber squadron. The Zeke fighter, the upper left there, it was often called a Zero. These are names that we gave them. The Japanese didn't really have names for their aircraft. They had a nomenclature, an alphanumeric number for it, but they didn't really have names for them. So that's what we started calling them. The middle one is a Val dive bomber, and the lower one is a Kate torpedo bomber. So, and there's the kind of the breakdown of the Japanese force. First carrier division, the Akagi and the Kaga. Second carrier division, the Hiryu and the Soryu. In the lower right, there's a picture of the Akagi, and that picture was taken in April of 42, I believe. So just before this battle. And you can get a picture of, you think about how big an aircraft carrier is now. If you look at that picture there in the lower right, you see the 2 Japanese planes. They barely fit wingtip to wingtip. I mean, that's a very, very small flight deck compared to like one of our nuclear powered carriers right now, where you could practically land a C-130 on it. Tiny. I mean, tiny by comparison. So that's what we got going up against each other. So here's a great picture. This is a picture of Nimitz on the right and Spruance on the left. And you can see this is taken a little bit later in the war because Spruance is a 4-star and Nimitz has been awarded his 5th star. So this is taken after December 44 when the 5-star rank came out. But anyway, there's those 2. And this is some pretty cool guidance, I think, what he tells Spruance, like, okay, you'll be governed by the principle of calculated risk, which you shall interpret to mean the avoidance of exposure of your force to attack by superior enemy forces without prospect of inflicting, as a result of such exposure, greater damage to the enemy. So basically, go out there, smack the Japanese fleet in the nose, but not to the point where you lose more than you destroy. Right?
I love this. I love this, Jerry. I mean, it really. I mean, obviously, one of the more quoted calculated risk orders.
Right.
In naval history, but I really believe that this is probably one of the finest examples of commander's intent that you can point to. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this, does it?
Yeah. No, just like, when Admiral King told Nimitz, don't come back until our fleet sails into Tokyo Bay. Got it. He's telling him, okay, look, you got it. You're the man. You do what you think is best. The only guidance I'm going to give you is don't lose the fleet.
Yeah.
Like, don't lose more than you destroy, because that's all we got, dude. I mean,
how do you teach this? We can talk about this probably afterwards, but I mean,
sure,
it's a big deal. When you look at this, very clear, very direct, and pretty short.
Yeah, I mean, one sentence. Here's kind of basically your guidance, and then he leaves it to him.
Yeah.
Go do what you think. And Nimitz is getting beat up over this. Why aren't you telling him this? Washington is breathing down his neck. Why aren't you telling him this? Why don't you have him do that? And he's like, hey, cool your jets, man. Spruance has got it. He's got it. Right? Let him go do his thing.
I just love this. I think this is
it's great
this
stuff.
Is just as important as the code breaking, by the way.
Absolutely. Because if you think if there were different personalities involved, how different it could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been a totally different outcome. So great guidance. There it is. Here's what I want you to do. Okay, so the Yorktown gets repaired. Again, it's going to take 6 months. You got 72 hours. That thing's sailing. Task Force 16 deploys to the northeast of Midway. If you look to your map in the lower right, you can see Task Force 16 northeast of Midway. They're up there. They're up there waiting. There's Midway Island, and there's a fan coming out of Midway. That's our PBY Catalina flying boat recon screen that we got going on out there. And you can see the Japanese efforts. So you got the carrier striking force and the invasion force heading toward Midway. And there's a northern operation going on in the Aleutians. They do go into the Aleutians and occupy a couple of islands up there that we don't get back until maybe a year later, 43. But it's a diversion. It's a diversion. It's a red herring. But we know this now because we're reading their mail. The Japanese, they think the U.S. carriers are still at Pearl Harbor because the last intel they got showed them at Pearl Harbor, even though it's probably over a week old. And you got people going, we need to confirm that because we don't know. And I'm like, well, why would they have moved? I know there was probably some young ensign going, well, I don't know, maybe they broke our code. You ever think of that? I mean, but probably got told to shut up in color, go sit down and shut up. The adults are talking, and you're like, okay, I'm just saying they do. Maybe we ought to confirm that, but they don't. And our carriers launch. The PBY patrol planes from Midway begin a search. They do like a 180 out, and these things can fly for hours, hundreds of miles. So they're going out, and this is binocular time. They're flying and looking. There's no, the radar thing. It's not really what it is now. We don't have satellites. We don't have any of that. It's eyeballs and binoculars trying to find these guys. On the 3rd of June, the Japanese go into the Aleutians, Operation AL, and we know that. We're like, yeah, we got it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But at 9 o'clock in the morning on June 3rd, an ensign named Jack Reed from Patrol Squadron 44 spots a Japanese occupation force 580 miles northwest of Midway and radios back main body, which is one of those. Could you be a little more precise? Like what, dude? Like that, hopefully that guy got a severe butt chewing for not being a little more specific. And is, like, what the heck does that mean? Are we carriers, battleships, landing ship? What are we talking here? But he spots the fleet. And at 15:30 that day, 9 B-17 bombers, they launch an attack on the Japanese ships. They don't score any hits. I mean, they're dropping from like 20,000 feet. So I don't know how long it takes a bomb to fall 20,000 feet, but I mean, a ship can do some serious maneuvers in the meantime. But they do attack, but they don't score any hits. So that's pretty much the opening salvo, the opening gun of the battle. June 4th, the decisive day. Right, this is when things are going to happen, and they start happening fast. The Japanese at 4:30 in the morning, they launch an airstrike against Midway. 108 aircraft. Right, they go after the airfields and the aircraft that are there in the installation. At 4:30, they also launch 7 search aircraft, and there's 2 types of different kind of float planes they launch to search for the American fleet because they don't know where they are. They think they're in Pearl Harbor, but now they start thinking, I don't know, maybe they are out there. Consequentially, one airplane, because of some engine trouble, launches about 30 minutes late. Keep that in mind. Okay. At 4:30, we launch another 11 PBY Catalinas from Midway to go out on that fan and search. And the Yorktown launches some. So things start happening at 4:30. The Yorktown launches 10 planes in a search. We're trying to find each other. Everyone's looking. Right. We know they're out there. They kind of think we're out there. No one really knows. We gotta find these guys. Each side's trying to find the other fleet. At 5:34. A PBY spots the Japanese fleet. So he's about 26 minutes early of Commander Layton's prediction of 0600 on the 4th. And he's basically on target, exactly where he said they were going to be. Northwest of Midway, about 175 miles out, northwest of Midway on this direction at 6 o'clock. This guy finds him at 5:34. So Layton is like, he's kind of dead on with that. They also spot the inbound air attack headed from Midway. Because the Japanese are launching this massive attack against the island at 6 o'clock, pretty much all the aircraft on the island we launch, get them off because we don't want them caught on the ground like happened at Pearl Harbor and what happened in the Philippines, 6 months earlier. Get them going. The fighters from Midway, they intercept the enemy strike fleet. There's F-4Fs and the Brewster Buffaloes. They shoot down 5 Japanese planes, but they take some seriously heavy losses. The Buffaloes, the F-2 Alphas, are pretty much shot out of the sky. I mean, they're horribly inadequate to go up against Zeros, but they try, and they shoot down a couple. The Japanese hit the island at about 6:30, and they lose 11 planes and 44 damage. So you think, okay, they launched 108 aircraft, and they 16 and 44, 60 planes of that 108 are either shot down or damaged. Okay, that's pretty significant. That's a significant smack. I mean, even if if they're shot down, they're gone. Obviously, if they're damaged, or they're going to have to at least be repaired before they can be put into action. So Midway they give the Japanese a bloody nose the first morning. This is where, all right, things are going now. Things are starting to happen.
Hey, Jerry, you're going to talk about that plane that launched 30 minutes
Yep,
late?
it's going to come up here in just a second here. So about 7 o'clock in the morning on the 4th, some TBF Avengers and a B-26 bombers from Midway launch. Nagumo orders a second strike on Midway. Now, this is kind of critical because his planes, his reserve of planes, the Japanese doctrine at the time was to maintain a reserve. And they go, hey, there's planes coming from Midway, which means we need to hit them again. So he has those planes armed with what are called contact bombs, not armor piercing bombs to deal with ships. There's a rearmament operation going on.
Mm-hmm.
The Enterprise and the Hornet launch their aircraft, and about 16 Dauntlesses from Midway attack the Japanese fleet. At about 8 o'clock, the late plane, right, locates the U.S. fleet, right? It locates the U.S. fleet, but it's 30 minutes behind everybody else. In the meantime, the Enterprise and the Hornet and everybody, they've already launched. They've already launched their planes. So that 30-minute delay caused a little bit late identification of the American fleet and the American fleet's location. 8:10, 8:20, some B-17 bombers and some Vindicators attack the Japanese fleet. And at 8:20, here's when things are going to start happening really, really fast. So the USS Nautilus, commanded by a commander named William Brockman, he's the gentleman in the upper right there with the whites on, who looks like kind of a hard ass. I mean, look at this guy. He's a submarine guy. He launches the torpedo attack against the Japanese fleet. He's very close to the Japanese fleet, and he gets chased away by a Japanese destroyer, the Arashi. Okay. So he's dodging and diving and whatever. He's trying to get away from this destroyer. Japanese fleet is still going. This destroyer is going after this submarine. And at 9 o'clock, the Yorktown launches its aircraft. Okay. It launches a major strike. Now, Nagumo, all right, he's got a problem. Okay. Nagumo's like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Do I attack the U.S. fleet because we just got a report from that scout plane that said they locate them? Do I attack the Japanese or the American fleet? Do I go after Midway again because my returning planes are telling me that we need another strike? Do I recover the Midway strike? The first strike is coming back, right? So he can't launch and recover aircraft at the same time. If he waits until he's recovered the Midway strike, it's going to put him way behind on launching the next strike. If he tries to launch the strike before the Midway guys are back, they're going to run out of gas and ditch. They're going to have to ditch into the sea. So he's trying to figure out what he needs to do. And where are the carriers? Where exactly are these carriers? Where are the American carriers? Now we know they're not at Pearl Harbor anymore. Okay, well, we found them, we think. At about 10 o'clock, the Japanese strike force returns. Nagumo decides, okay, I can't afford to lose all those planes just because they run out of fuel. That would be, oh my God, they'll hang me for that, whatever. So we're going to recover the Midway strike, get those guys back on board, and then I will launch the reserve force against the U.S. fleet. Yeah, well, guess what? We just loaded all the reserve planes with bombs to attack Midway Island. Now you're saying you want to attack the U.S. fleet. We got to change that, change the kind of bombs, put the torpedoes on, refuel. All this is going on. There's confusion all over the place. The Japanese carriers, they're covered with planes. There's fuel and ordnance all over the place, fueled up aircraft on the flight deck, on the hangar deck the next day below. I mean, it's a mess. They're trying to get this in their haste. The doctrine back then was you took ordnance off and you put it in the steel bunkers in the bowels of the ship before you brought other ordnance out. You didn't have all this stuff lying around, because exactly what is going to take place in the next couple of minutes is what could take place. So lots of confusion. There's a great picture there on the left. That's a picture of Torpedo Squadron 6, commanded by a guy named Gene Lindsay from the Enterprise on the morning of the 4th. They're getting ready to go.
Gary, getting back to that scout plane, I keep coming back to it, and I'm not sure if it's too convenient to hang the battle on that one airplane, but I mean, with everything that you just mentioned, that scout plane launching 30 minutes late seems to have been pretty decisive with the whole decision-making process that was happening on the part of the Japanese.
Yeah, they were. I mean, based on the intel he had before, he goes, okay, I'll launch a strike against Midway. And then 30 minutes later, if he had gotten that report 30 minutes earlier, he wouldn't have been doing the dance, trying to rearm and refuel the planes and have all that ordnance and fuel all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, possibly. I mean, but you're right. I mean, it's like Wellington or Napoleon said, right? Battles are lost and won in a quarter of an hour. And in this case, It really contributed to the disaster that's going to unfold for the Japanese in the next couple minutes. So there's confusion, right? They're trying to recover aircraft, launch aircraft, change armament, whatever. Don't forget the Japanese destroyer that's chasing that American submarine, because that's going to come into play here in just a second. So we're at about 9 o'clock, 9:10. June 4th, 1942, again, U.S. squadrons, they launch piecemeal and they arrive independently over the Japanese fleet. Doctrine at the time was you launch fighters for local cover, then you launch your aircraft. Once everybody's out, your torpedo bombers, your dive bombers, your scout bombers, and your fighters, and you go together toward the enemy location or suspected enemy location. Spruance and Fletcher decided, hey, look, just get going. As soon as you got your squadron together, go. Like we need to find these guys. We don't have time to waste. So they arrived at all different times, and some of them missed the Japanese fleet altogether. The Hornet Air Group follows an incorrect heading. They missed the Japanese fleet, the dive bombers. The fighters have to ditch because they run out of gas. Torpedo Squadron 8 changes course, and they locate the Japanese fleet. So Torpedo 8 from the Hornet attacks, and that guy's commanded by the guy in the upper left. His name is John Waldron. They lose 15 planes. 15 out of 15 are shot down. So you have 15 crews, 15 pilots, 15 radio operators. They all get shot down. They're all dead. I mean, they lose 15 guys in a couple of minutes. One survivor is an ensign named George Gay, and that's the gentleman, the second from the left. He's a torpedo bomber pilot. He gets shot down, but he ditches his plane and he lands in the water and is able to get out of the plane. Unfortunately, his radio operator gunner is killed, but he gets out of the plane and he is literally floating in the middle of the Japanese fleet. He's surrounded by the Japanese. I mean, all around him is a Japanese fleet. He's just out here floating, trying not to be conspicuous, bobbing around in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And he sees the entire thing unfold.
He has a front row seat.
Literally front row seat. I mean, he is like he's literally watching the Japanese carriers. They're right there. He gets shot at a couple times, but they miss. Torpedo 6 from the Enterprise, 9 of 14 Devastators are shot down. They're commanded by a guy named George Lindsay. He's the third from the left with the black coat there. He's killed in the attack. And then Torpedo 3 from the Yorktown attacks at about 10 minutes after 10. 10 of 12 are shot down. They're commanded by a guy named Lance Massey. That's the gentleman on the far right. And they basically get obliterated. I mean, this is the American torpedo bomber attack. It's destroyed. Three squadrons, almost all of them are shot down. It's an incredible sacrifice on these guys' part.
Well, and it's interesting too, Gerry, because how do you convey and make people understand that that squadron, with all those losses, can be wiped out and can still be essential to the overall victory?
Absolutely, and as we're going to see, they contribute their sacrifice and their deaths contribute directly to what takes place in the next couple minutes. Absolutely. So part of the problem is our torpedoes at that point, and there's a picture of a TBD Devastator taken off right there. You can see the torpedo there. Our torpedoes are faulty. A lot of them are duds. They go haywire. The fins go stupid and they go against the target. Sometimes they go too deep and they go underneath the target that they're intended to hit. Now there's some problems with these things, and this does happen. But what they managed to do is this attack. So you see this attack from 9:20 to 10:10. So over a period of about 50 minutes, you got these squadrons coming in from different angles, and they keep the Japanese carriers off balance. They're unable to launch any aircraft or recover any aircraft because they're dodging torpedoes. I mean, they're trying to stay out of the line of fire. Anti-aircraft fire is going everywhere, so they keep them off balance. The Japanese fighter cover, they get low on fuel. A lot of them have to ditch. They run out of ammunition. They can't land because the Japanese are doing these evasive actions. Like they're hard over, like trying to avoid torpedoes. The attack by Torpedo 3 draws most of the Zeros away from covering the fleet like they're supposed to do. And the anti-aircraft gunners they're all searching at sea level. They're looking for more torpedo bombers. They're not looking up here. Right. So you had this planet alignment, perfect storm kind of situation. The carriers are off balance. They can't land or recover aircraft. The fighter cover is low on ammunition and fuel. Some of them have to ditch. They're off chasing torpedo bombers, not protecting the fleet. Most of the Zeros get drawn away. The anti-aircraft gunners aren't looking up. They're not paying attention. And the ships are crowded with loaded, fueled aircraft. And there's bombs and fuel and ammunition all over the place. And the dive bombers show up. So at about 10 o'clock, while all that's going on, the Enterprise dive bombers, led by a guy named Wade McCluskey, he's the guy on the far left in the dress uniform. He's commanding the Enterprise Air Group. They're running out of fuel. And he goes, hey, we're going to fly 5 more minutes, and then we got to turn back. Otherwise, we're not going to make it back to the ship. We're going to have to ditch. They fly a couple more minutes. They see a Japanese destroyer moving at flank speed all by itself. And McCluskey goes, well, gee, I wonder what that guy's doing out here all by himself. Maybe he's trying to catch up to the fleet. It was the Arashi that was chasing the Nautilus, the submarine, depth charged it, and was trying to get back to the fleet. And basically, its wake was pointing directly toward the Japanese fleet. And he happened to show up because he says, we're going to go 5 more minutes and we're going to turn around a couple minutes in. Hey, look at that. Let's follow that guy. There's the Japanese fleet. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Unbelievable.
So 30 dive bombers from Bombing 6 and Scouting 6, they attacked the Kaga and the Akagi. And the 17 dive bombers from Bombing 3, they attacked the Soryu. So the second picture from the left is a guy named Max Leslie. He commands Bombing 3. And then the guy to the right, the next guy over, third from the left, is a guy named Dick Best, Richard Best. He's commanding Bombing 6 off the Enterprise. And then the guy on the far right is a guy named Clarence Dickinson. He's a bomber pilot in Scouting 6. And they're both off of Enterprise. Really cool picture to the left, the group photo there. The guy sitting right in the middle, right up front, is Dick Best. That's the squadron leader. The guy standing right behind him is a guy named Kroger. And the guy to his right is a guy named Fred Weber. And they are all going to go on this attack on the Japanese fleet. So real quick recap. Torpedo bombers come in. They get annihilated. The Japanese are distracted. They can't load or land or recover aircraft. There's fuel and bombs and planes all over the place. The Zeros are running out of fuel, or they're out of the picture, and the bombers show up because McCluskey says we're going to fly 5 more minutes. They happen to see that Japanese destroyer that was chasing the American submarine trying to get back to the fleet. They get in behind it, and they follow it straight to the fleet. The timing is absolutely perfect. I don't think you could have timed it better if you planned it, and I don't think they planned it. I think it was probably kind of inadvertent. Okay, so at about 10:25, the 30 dive bombers from Bombing 6 and Scouting 6, they attacked the Kaga and the Akagi. There's some initial confusion. Doctrine at the time, the lead element would go for the far carrier, and the trail element would go for the near carrier, so they would turn simultaneously. McCluskey, who was the lead, was supposed to go for the far carrier, which would have been the Akagi, but he got excited and was like, he just dove on the first carrier, and he almost caused a massive midair collision in Dick Best's squadron coming up behind him because he was supposed to take the first carrier. McCluskey was supposed to go for the far. So Best, once again, leaders making a decision like right then, just like McCluskey. Hey, we'll go 5 more minutes. Best says, whoa. Hey, follow me. And he gets 2 other guys to come with him. Right. So he goes and they go for the far carrier, which is the Akagi. And the 17 dive bombers of Bombing 3, they attack the Soryu. And here's some good diagrams here. I found these. So the Kaga is hit by what looks like 5 bombs, both 500-pounders and one 1,000-pounder. And these are armor-piercing bombs that go through the flight deck. They penetrate to the hangar deck where all the fuel and planes and all that stuff is, and they explode there, and it's gone. It gets hit 4 times, 5 times. Wasn't it Clarence Dickinson? He scores a hit there just right by the island on the starboard side of the ship. Direct hit. It's not so much the size of these bombs, but the fact that they're armor piercing. They penetrate the flight deck and they go down to the hangar deck. And as luck would have it, the Japanese had kind of abandoned safety precautions about having fuel and bombs all over the place, and they hit them at just the right time. And one of the guys there, Lieutenant Junior Grade Dusty Kleiss, drops a 500-pounder, and he hits that ship. Meanwhile, over at the Akagi, Best keeps going. He dives on it. Him and his 2 guys, Kroger and Weber, they have 1,000-pound. Each one has a 1,000-pound bomb. Kroger and Weber score really close, near misses. Weber's actually jams up the rudder of the Akagi, but Best comes in and he drops a 1,000-pounder. I mean, you can see the explosion right there, center mass. I mean, boom! He hits it right dead center, right in the 10 ring, as we say on the rifle range. It goes down to the hangar deck, explodes, and that ship is gone. And then over at the Soryu, Bombing 3 is taking care of the Soryu. They score 3 hits. So in the space of a couple minutes, that's why, hey, 6 minutes at midway. In the space of a couple minutes, boom, 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 3 of the 4 Japanese carriers are done. I mean, they're out of action.
How easily could those 6 minutes gone the other way?
Oh, absolutely. You remember these guys, dive bombers, they nose over at about 20,000 feet, right there. I mean, that's when they start their dive, and they're going at about an 85-degree down angle. They're practically coming straight down. And despite that, of the 47 planes that attacked, We only scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hits. All right, so it's not a perfect discipline, and it very easily could have gone the other way if the Japanese fighters. I mean, there so many things had to have happened for this to work. The attention drawn toward the torpedo bombers and that sacrifice. The ship going after the Nautilus and McCluskey saying, "I'm going to fly 5 more minutes." If he'd have said 5 minutes earlier, "Hey, screw it, we're out of fuel, we got to turn around," this attack never would have happened. It never would have happened. They'd have flown back to their carriers to rearm and refuel, and we would have missed a golden opportunity. So yeah, absolutely, it's a lot of luck, a lot of inadvertent coincidence, I think, or maybe not. I mean, I don't know. It depends on
a lot of different moving parts that happen to align.
Absolutely, absolutely. Japanese decisions, and we go back to that decision making. Decisions on the Japanese part, decisions on the American side. We're going to fly 5 more minutes. We're going to do this. Rearm the planes with this. We're going to whatever. I mean, confusion. Yeah. I mean, if you were scripting this, I don't think you could come. I think you could come up with this. And yet it's true. So yeah. So in the space of a couple minutes, boom, boom, boom. 3 of the 4 major Japanese fleet carriers are gone. I mean, they're out of commission. At about 11 o'clock. The 4th carrier is still out there, right? To hear you, it's still out there. It launches about 24 planes. They take off. They follow the U.S. planes, right, as they're trying to get back to their carriers. And they attack the Yorktown at about 12 o'clock. They score 3 bomb hits. The Hear You gets detected at about 1:30. So we find that 4th carrier from a scouting flight. They launch some more. So you can see there's a lot of back and forth. The Japanese are doing this. We're doing this. A lot of times they're crossing paths. They're going back and forth. The Yorktown, okay, the bombs are okay. They get it back in service. It's making about 18 knots, but around 2:30, there's a second attack on the Yorktown and 2 torpedo hits. So the Japanese, torpedo attacks are still viable. They hit the Yorktown with 2 torpedoes, and around 1500, it has to be abandoned. There's a picture up top of the Yorktown on fire, and then the lower picture there is Max Leslie, bombing 3 pilot from Yorktown, ditching his plane because the Yorktown's a mess. He can't land it, so he ditched and had to get fished out of the water. So the Japanese strike back. They hit one of our carriers. All right. So now we're at about 1500. 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 4th. Here's a diagram of the Yorktown, the 1 bomb hit. There's 1 upper front there blanged off the flight deck. It was a near miss, but they scored a direct hit. You can see on the lower picture, it goes deep into the ship and doesn't cause the same kind of damage that our bombs did to the Japanese fleet. But the torpedoes are what are going to take it out later on. All right, so we got 3 carriers. They got 1 of ours, so we're down. We got 2 left. They got 1. The battle's still going on. So later on in the day, at about 15:30, we put together about 25 dive bombers from whoever's left, whoever made it back. Who's still flying? Dick Best is there. This gentleman right here, Norman Kleiss, he scored a hit on the first attack. He's part of it, and we're like, hey, we got to go out. There's 1 more carrier out there. We got to go get that thing. We got to go get to Hear You. It's still out there, right? So they launch another attack, and it is a pickup team. It's a composite. Who do we got left? What planes can we still get in the air, get them armed, get them refueled, get them back up, and then go back up there? By the way, Kleiss's nickname is Dusty because earlier in his career, I guess, he browned out the control tower of an airfield where he made an illegal landing and browned it out with dust so that before he took off, before they could get his tail number, and he was never discovered who did it. Wow. So his nickname from that point forward was Dusty. But he's one of them too. He's the guy who kind of gets short-sheeted on this recognition thing, but we'll talk about him in a minute. So another dive bomber attack goes after the Hear You at 1700. They hit him. They hit the Hear You, gone. They take it out, right? They managed to take it out. In the meantime, both the Soryu and the Kaga, they sink. They're out of the picture. So here's the last attack on the Hear You. 4 bomb strikes. See Dick Best hits with a 1,000-pounder, and Kleiss hits with a 500-pounder. A lieutenant named Shumway drops a 1,000-pounder, and an ensign named Jacquard, he drops a 500-pounder, and it's hit 4 times. Boom, 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 gone. I mean, it's destroyed. The same thing. So two of these gentlemen, Dick Best and Dusty Kleiss, they are the 2 guys who scored a hit on 2 carriers on the same day. They're the only 2 guys to score 2 hits, 2 different ships on the same day.
Oh,
yeah, pretty impressive flying, and they make it back alive, which is even more astounding. There's a picture of the Hear You afire. The next day, on June 5th, the Kagi goes down, the Hear You sinks, and the 4 Japanese fleet carriers that started this thing, they're gone. I mean, they're gone. We've sunk them. There's some continued attacks on the 6th of June. This is the Japanese cruiser, the Mikuma, And that's a picture of Dauntless is going after it. If you look in that picture, you can see like in the center, a little bit to the right, there's a smoke coming out, and it's like being blown to the left of the picture. That's the Mikuma. That's the ship above in the picture above that's been hit by Dauntless dive bombers. Dusty Kleiss hits that ship on the 6th of June. So he's the only pilot in the Midway action that scores 3 hits on 3 different ships.
Wow.
He hits 2 carriers and 1 cruiser.
That's one of my favorite pictures, by the way. I didn't know the story behind it.
Yep, and that's a great. I mean, that's a great shot of them dive bombers, man. Open cockpit, 20,000 feet. They're on oxygen. I mean, it's crazy days. But 6 June, 2 days later, this is still going on.
Yep.
On the 7th, we lose the Yorktown. It finally goes under. It had been abandoned. Oddly enough, the loss of life, while unfortunate, was pretty minimal. We were able to get almost everybody off. And then after the battle, so the Japanese-American fleets, they continue to look for each other and trade minor attacks. The Saratoga, which was on the west coast of the United States, steams over and it joins the fleet on the 8th. So we're U.S. fleet's back up to 3 carriers, and the U.S. fleet departs the area. It goes back to Pearl Harbor on June 10th. Japanese fleet lost 4 fleet carriers, a really large percentage of their trained pilots, crews, mechanics, technicians, their flight deck crews, their armorers. A lot of those guys were killed when those carriers went up. They try and rebuild. They actually commission another fleet carrier at the end of 44, about 2 years later. But in the meantime, we've built like 30 carriers in the same time. So again, that reliance on external resources, we had all that. And the thing that Yamamoto argued against, like the American industrial capability, by then is really catching up. And we're cranking out aircraft carriers. I mean, like victory ships every 30 days. And at this point forward, the United States is now on the offensive. The whole thing has changed. The Japanese were at high tide on June 3rd, 42, but on June 4th, it's completely turned around, and the U.S. will be on the offensive for the rest of the war. That's a Dauntless dive bomber that actually participated in the Midway battle. It is located at the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, in Florida. You can go and see it. It wasn't from one of the carriers. It was from one of the outfits that was based on Midway Island. But that plane actually participated in the battle, that exact plane, which is pretty cool. So what happened to these guys? So Nimitz, he becomes a 5-star fleet admiral. He dies in 66. Yamamoto is killed in April of 1943. We are still using that code-breaking capability, and we determined that he's going to be on an inspection trip flying around, and when there just happens to be a flight of P-38 twin-engine fighters show up and blow him into the weeds on Bougainville, because we cracked the code and we knew he was going to be on his inspection ship. So yeah, we got Yamamoto. We assassinated Yamamoto, basically. They shot him down. But again, it was the code breakers who knew it. Halsey becomes a 5-star admiral in December of 45 after the war. He dies in 1959. Nagumo actually commits suicide on Saipan in July of 44, as a lot of senior officers in the Japanese military did. Fletcher, he makes 4-star admiral. He dies in 73. Ray Spruance becomes an admiral, and he's ambassador to the Philippines. He dies in 69. Roquefort, the codebreaker, oddly enough, he doesn't really get any recognition for his role. He kind of rubbed people the wrong way. I think he's a different kind of bird. He makes it to captain, 06. But doesn't get a lot of recognition. He's actually a movie consultant for the Midway movie that's made in 1976. He's actually part of that. Layton, the intel guy that told him it was going to be 6 o'clock on June 4th at this whatever, he makes it to Rear Admiral, dies in 84. Wade McCluskey gets a Navy Cross for his actions. He commands the Corregidor, a carrier later on, makes it to Rear Admiral. And I believe there is still in naval aviation the Wade McCluskey Award for the best attack squadron in the Navy. That's awarded every year. He's involved in the movie Midway for a little bit. He dies in 76, the year the movie came out. Dick Best gets a Navy Cross, but he never flew again because his oxygen tank there was a chemical problem with it. He got a bad mixture, seared his lungs really bad, tore his lungs up. He couldn't fly. So his last flight, his last action is at Midway, where he basically drops bombs on 2 different carriers and gets a Navy Cross. But he never flies again. He's part of the movie making business about the movie that they make in 76, and he died in 2001. Dusty Kleiss, the guy who scored 3 hits, he's awarded the Navy Cross. He becomes an instructor. He's the guy, he gets 3 ships. He dies in 2016. He just passed away about 10 years ago. He was 100 years old. Probably, at the time, the last aviator still alive from the battle. But he's never really mentioned. In the new movie about Midway that came out in 2019, They talk a lot about Dick Best. And they actually say at the end, one of only two pilots to score 2 hits, but they don't mention who the other guy was. They don't even mention Kleiss, which is kind of strange. I mean, he got 3 hits, 2 carriers and a cruiser.
Yeah. Critical omission.
Yeah, critical. George Gay, the guy who basically was floating in the water watching this whole, he sees the dive bomber attack. He survives. He's awarded the Navy Cross. They fish him out of the ocean about 30 hours later. He's floating around for over a day, but they get him out of there. He serves at Guadalcanal, later becomes an instructor, and he's involved in the movie in 1976. He dies in 94. And when he passed away, he had himself cremated, and he had his ashes scattered over the area of the Pacific Ocean where his squadron died in 1942, which I think is pretty cool. So, yeah, they're all together again. Max Leslie, commanding Bombing 3. He got a Navy Cross, retired in 56, made Rear Admiral. He's involved in the movie in 1976, and he dies in 85. And Clarence Dickinson, he hit the Akagi. He gets a Navy Cross, he makes Rear Admiral, and he dies in 1984. And that's a picture of the Midway movie from 76. That's one of those epic all-star, I mean, Hal Holbrook, Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, Charlton Heston. I mean, everybody's a very young Eric Estrada before he got out of the Navy and became a California Highway Patrol motorcycle cop.
Funny.
Was a fighter pilot in Midway. A very young Tom Selleck, pre-Magnum PI mustache, is in it for a very short period of time. He's got a really bit role. And Larry Zonka, the Miami Dolphins fullback from the early 70s, has a bit part as an engineering officer on the Yorktown, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so Glenn Ford is in there, and there they all are. Again, they made another movie, a remake of the Midway movie in 2019. It's by Roland Emmerich as the director, and it's pretty good. If you want to watch a movie, they're both very good, but they're pretty faithful to the timeline and the personalities. They did a pretty good job. Right. And then Winston Churchill said this about Midway, which I think is pretty cool, especially the bottom part. At one stroke, the dominant position of Japan in the Pacific was reversed. Yeah. That pretty much, if you could sum it down, if you can give it one sentence, what happened at Midway? Japanese offensive capability turned around. So
would you say, Gerry, that Midway was the turning point or a turning point that, Guadalcanal would share with that title?
It's interesting because there's a school of thought out there that says Midway was the turning point of the war in the Pacific. And I think there's a very solid argument to be made for that. But then I remember reading another historian who said, well, the real turning point of the war in the Pacific was the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Because the war in the Pacific started before we were involved. It started in the 30s when the Japanese went into Manchuria. Yeah. And the turning point was when they attacked us and got us involved. So I think you can make that argument. I think you can make the argument that, hey, that was a massive strategic blunder. I mean, their whole reason for doing it was to keep us out of the way. And in the end, we dropped atomic bombs on them. I mean, it really didn't go the way they thought it was going to go. But yeah. Guadalcanal, too. Critical piece, kept the sea lanes open to Australia, without which the Southwest Pacific campaign of New Guinea and going into the Philippines wouldn't have happened. So I think it's more accurate, I think personally, to say it was a turning point, a very critical one, but one of several. Yeah.
Well, Gerry, it was extraordinary. What's even more extraordinary is that you're an Army guy and you're able to talk about a naval battle like this.
Who knew? Who knew?
Well, thanks, Gerry. So let's go to the audience and see. We've got we've got actually quite a few folks here with us. It's great to see cool. Andy, Bill, David, Ken, May, and William with us. So thanks very much for joining us. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hands or put your questions there in the chat, and I'll read them out. And while the first ones come in, let me just start us off. And so, Gerry, you framed tonight around 4 words: leadership, intelligence, courage, and luck. If you had to rank them at Midway, which would you say mattered most, and how would you do that ranking?
I think courage is obviously critical, but I would say it was what put that courage in the position to be executed. I think is the intelligence that gave our leadership the opportunity to put that courage to the test. And I think us reading Japanese mail, I don't think this could have happened without that. I don't know if without that information we would have drawn that same conclusion. Would Washington, would the Pentagon, would the National Command Authority be really pushing for a different tactic? Would we have even thought of Midway? Yeah, there might have been someone, but I mean, this really gave us the ability to say, look, here's right here where they're mentioning they're going after Midway. We know this because of their water purification, ruse that we use. But then, close on the heels of the intelligence is the leadership at all levels, the guts to make a decision and
Mm-hmm.
stick with it, from Nimitz all the way down to those individual pilots. That's kind of the way I would rank it. Yeah, tough question, but I think, without that intelligence capability, without that information, I don't know if the leadership would have the ammunition to take the position that they did.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a very good point.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, William Berneski says, great presentation, Jerry. Thanks. Tell us about Andy Tertychny surviving a kamikaze attack.
Okay, so for those of you out there, Bill Berneski is my roommate from VMI. I lived with that guy for
Oh my
4
God.
years. So we've known each other since we were 18 years old. Yeah, it's been a while, Bill, but we do get together pretty regularly, and we talk pretty regularly. But yeah, my dad joined the Navy at 17 in 1943, so not quite a year later. Skipped school, drove to Pittsburgh with his buddy, joined the Navy, and was on a seaplane tender called the Kenneth Whiting, which was struck by a kamikaze on June 21st, which is tomorrow, 1945, after combat operations had been deemed closed on Okinawa. He got hit by kamikaze. Obviously survived it because I'm here. Yeah, hell of a guy. He did 3 years during the war, got out for about a year and a half, got married, started a family, and went back in the Navy and stayed for 20 years. And got out in 1967. And I
Well,
ended up in the Army. Yeah, that whole water business. Yeah, that's
well,
not for
our
me.
Army Navy game day must have been interested in your household.
Yeah, he was just, people would ask him like, "What's with that son of yours? Like jumping out of planes? What the?" He's like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" He was like, "But my
Yeah.
my brother at Bill there, he was a naval officer too. He served on the Ticonderoga. He was a surface warfare officer coming out of VMI. So he is, and Bill, I'll tell everybody that he is the toughest guy I know. He is one tough guy, and I am very blessed for having known him and spent those years together when we were very very young men. So
That's great.
back in the day, back when we used to read about stuff like this.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, and Jerry, Ken Conley has a question. His is, in your opinion, would we have won the war in the Pacific even if we had lost Midway? Good question.
Great question. Ken Conley is another friend of mine. I went to high school with him. So, but yeah, great guy. Also a naval officer. Also a naval officer. Yeah, great question. Would the ultimate ending to the war have been the same? I think the short answer is yes. I think we would have won because I believe that American industrial capability and industrial might and manufacturing capability would have, as it did, outstripped Japan as it did. Would have been tougher though because they still would have had their carrier striking capability, and we'd have had been a lot. At that point, we turned from the defense to the offense, and I think that point might have been pushed a little bit further to the right for us to basically go from defense to offense because they would have still had that striking capability, and they would have been a threat to Hawaii. Even I mean, the West Coast is not too far. I don't know that they could have done more than raid, but I mean, psychologically, like the Doolittle raid, right? Didn't cause a lot of physical damage, but a lot of psychological damage to the Japanese. So yeah, I think short answer is yes. I think the end result would have been the same, but it may have taken us longer to get there. Probably longer to get there. Yeah.
Well, saying we could have a whole other webinar about Jerry Tertychny in high school and college.
Oh my God. Nobody, trust me, nobody wants to hear about that. Those guys have seen me at my very absolute worst.
Well,
So
they're still with you, and they're still attending. They're still listening to you, obviously. So that's great.
best guys you'll ever meet. Best
Yeah.
guys you'll ever meet. Awesome
We're
friends.
very grateful for everybody joining us. And David, your question, he says, great presentation. Will a replay be available? And the answer to that is yes, probably in a couple days. We'll get that posted. And if you haven't already, subscribe on Facebook or LinkedIn to the Heroes Path Foundation, and you'll see it there. And what I'll try to do, I'm still trying to get used to the Zoom webinar business, but I think we have your emails, and so we'll push this out to you as well that way. Sound good?
Great fun. Great fun. I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, always fun to talk about our heroes.
Oh, it's fabulous. Well, one other final thing too for everybody. If you go to Heroes Path website, which is heroespathfoundation.org. We're about ready to unveil that website, but it's up right now. So for those of you who want to go there, you can see it and see what we're up to. But one of the things that we're doing, we're approaching the 250th anniversary of our country, the semi-quincentennial. And so what we did was we've created, and if you can see it here, I'll show everybody this coin. But it's a 200 USA 250 commemorative coin that we designed, and that we've struck to mark the moment. One side honors the here we go. Let's see, there we go. One side honors the founding, the other, and it's dated. We have 2026 on the front, and
Nice.
then 1776 on the back. And this is available to anybody who wants to support the Heroes Path Foundation, which we're just getting started, by the way. So, and we're going to have a lot more webinars. We're going to have Gerry back with us. But when you hold this coin, and it comes in one of these silk felt cases, we'd love to be able to send that over to you, just as a commemoration. So, thanks very much for all of your support to the Heroes Path Foundation. But Gerry,
Nice.
thank you for taking us into these 6 minutes and everything that made them possible. And to everyone who joined us tonight, thank you for being a part of the Heroes Path webinar series. We're going to, as I mentioned, keep it up. We're going to keep these stories alive. It's how we honor the men and women who lived them. So watch your email for the recording and the details on our next session as well. And in fact, I think the next one we're going to be doing is with George Luz Jr. So if you ever watched Band of Brothers, he is the son of George Luz Sr., who you'll remember well from the series Band of Brothers. He's
Nice.
Part of Easy Company. And then on July 1st, we have Mike Shriver, who's going to be conducting a webinar about American philanthropy over the last 250 years of our history. So both great events that are coming up. We've kind of packed them up here into a 7-day period. But until then, take care of one another, stay curious, and good night. Bye-bye now. We've got a bunch of other comments here. It says, great presentation. Great to see Colonel T again. That's from Bill Strasberg. David says, thank you. And Andy Curl says, bravo Zulu, Brother Rat. Outstanding presentation. And
Curl's another one of my classmates.
Okay. And then David says, what's the problem with Mr. Sobel?
What's the problem, Mr. Sobel? Get this damn platoon on the move.
Yeah, that's right. Well, all right, everybody. It's just good to be with you all. And thanks so much for joining us.
Very cool.
Really
Thank
great.
you so much, boss. I appreciate the opportunity, and man, great organization you're going, and glad to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
We're just getting started. That's
it.
Thing.
That's
All
it.
right.
Straight out of the net. Good to go.
Take care now.
Okay, boss.